They found his teeth before they found his name. Scattered beneath a burned-out Buick in southeast D.C., the pavement still steamed from the gasoline fire. A single gold canine glinted under flashing squad lights, Wayne Perry's calling card. Somewhere in the distance, a payphone clattered against the receiver, left hanging by a trembling hand. The streets had gone quiet, unnaturally so. The man in the shadows, early 30s, African-American, tight fade, leather trench soaking in blood mist, walked calmly down the alley, unbothered by the carnage behind him. Wayne Silk Perry didn't run. He moved like death knew his schedule. They said he was invisible, but that night, he wanted to be seen. A setup had gone wrong, or maybe exactly right. 3 bodies in under 7 seconds, no hesitation, no remorse. His empire didn't start with money. It started with silence, and the echo of a bullet casing spinning to stillness. Before he was the shadow that made DC killers whisper, Wayne Perry was just a boy on 7th Street, smart, fearless, and starving. His mother cleaned houses. His father was a ghost. The only thing that came home every night was hunger. Wayne watched older boys flash knots of cash and gold chains from behind cracked window blinds. He learned fast. Charm could open doors, but fear could kick them off the hinges. At 13, he knocked out a grown man in a dice game dispute. By 16, he was already on retainer as muscle for hustlers twice his age. They called him Silk, because he moved like smoke. Silent, smooth, deadly. But even then, it wasn't about money. It was about respect, control, survival. The streets didn't make Wayne. They exposed him. And the boy who once begged for quarters would soon build an empire from bullets and silence. Wayne didn't just survive the jungle, he mapped it. His first kill wasn't out of rage. It was calculus. A rival crew had been circling too close. Perry waited. One night, beneath a buzzing street lamp, he stepped out of the shadows and ended it with a single shot. No words. No hesitation. Words spread like smoke in a closed room. Silk wasn't just a nickname. It was a warning. His hands were steady. His eyes didn't flinch. He studied his prey like a surgeon, not a savage. And the killers he rolled with? Even they knew not to test him. He wasn't the loudest. He wasn't the biggest. But he was the last man you saw when the world went quiet. Perry wasn't chasing fear. He was perfecting it. By the early 90s, Wayne Silk Perry had transformed from feared shooter to urban myth. Kids told stories like campfire tales, how he once walked into a trap house and made 10 armed men lower their guns with a single look. The myth wasn't far off. His body count was whispered, never confirmed. Every crew wanted him. Kingpins tried to buy him. But Perry moved by his own code. He protected those who paid right and punished betrayal with biblical wrath. His presence at a meeting meant deals wouldn't go sideways. He wasn't just muscle, he was insurance. Men who had never feared bullets feared Wayne. And still, he rarely spoke. His silence was louder than their screams. That night, the Buick, the fire, the teeth, it wasn't random. Perry had known it was coming. A crew he once shielded had broken code. They tried to move a shipment behind his back. He warned them once. When they laughed, he made sure it was the last sound they ever made. The explosion wasn't just vengeance. It was theater. A message to the city. Perry wasn't losing control. He was reminding them who built the throne from blood and silence. The gold tooth? That wasn't from a victim. It was his. Planted beneath the Buick. A decoy. A warning. A trap for anyone who thought the king had fallen. Long before the name, Silk, echoed through D.C., Wayne Perry was a child walking barefoot on summer asphalt that burned like betrayal. He was 10 when he watched his mother get evicted, her hands shaking as she held a final eviction notice and a plastic trash bag of clothes. No man stepped forward. No family. Just neighbors pretending not to hear. Wayne didn't cry. He stared at the landlord with eyes that burned colder than winter steel. That moment etched something permanent in him: depend on no one, love no one, owe no one. The next morning, he stole his first gun from a glove box. It wasn't rage. It was clarity. In a city built to crush boys like him, Perry understood survival wasn't about strength. It was about resolve. His heart didn't harden, it calcified. Wayne's mother loved him, but love couldn't feed them. She worked 2 jobs, rarely smiled, and aged fast in silence. She begged him to stay in school, but the classroom couldn't compete with the block. At 14, Wayne brought home more in one night hustling than she made all week. She slapped him. He stood still. Her palm shook. He said nothing. That silence, thick, final, was the last conversation they ever had. The next morning, she found his bed made, his room empty. She cried, but not out loud. Wayne had left as a boy and returned years later as someone she didn't recognize. Silk wasn't her son. He was the armor her son built to never feel that slap again. The first time Wayne saw a man die, he didn't flinch. It was a backroom deal gone wrong in a gambling den near Howard University. The shot rang out like a starter pistol. Everyone ducked. Perry didn't. He watched. Memorized the shooter's stance, the blood spray arc, the way silence swallowed the room after. That night he didn't sleep. Not because of fear, but because he couldn't stop replaying it. Violence wasn't chaos to him. It was choreography. Precision. Once. A lesson. He wasn't fascinated with death. He was preparing for it. The next time someone raised a gun in that room, it was him. And he didn't miss. Love never left Perry, it just learned to hide. When he met Tanya, it was under a streetlight outside a pool hall. She wore denim and defiance. She saw through the swagger, saw the boy still holding his mother's eviction notice in his chest. For a while, she softened him. He smiled more. Laughed even. But in his world, love was a liability. She begged him to leave the life. He promised someday. Someday never came. When her brother caught a bullet meant for Perry, she didn't scream. She looked him in the eyes and walked away. That hurt more than any bullet ever could. Silk had love. And the streets made sure he'd never forget why he shouldn't again. By 19, Perry had buried more friends than most men twice his age. Some died over turf, some over pride, most over nothing. He stopped attending funerals when he realized grief made him a target. But he never forgot the faces. They visited him at night, eyes wide, mouths open, as if still begging for breath. Perry didn't drink, didn't do drugs. His only escape was the silence between gunshots. That stillness. That calm. That's where he lived now. And if death came, he'd meet it the same way he lived, head high, no regrets, and ready to pull first. Money came fast. And with it, blood. Wayne Silk Perry became more than a name. He became the contract you called when fear wasn't enough. By 1990, he was the enforcer behind half of DC's major operations. His name was whispered at courtrooms, drug corners, even in prison cells. But power paints a target. The feds started watching. Rivals plotted silently. His own crew began asking questions they used to fear. Paranoia wasn't a side effect. It was survival. Perry doubled his guard, tripled his rounds, and slept with one eye open. He stopped trusting doors. Only walls. The empire was real. But so was the pressure. And the deeper he climbed, the fewer allies stood beside him. He wasn't ascending. He was isolating. The police weren't just watching, they were closing in. Undercover wiretaps picked up whispers of Silk in every major case file. But nothing stuck. No prints, no cameras, no snitches, just corpses. They brought in every trick: street informants, surveillance vans, fake buyers. Still, Perry moved like smoke. Until one rookie made a mistake. He followed the wrong car, raided the wrong stash house, and triggered a war. Perry's crew lit up the block in retaliation. No masks, no fear. Daylight. Dot. Children screamed. Sirens choked the air. It was a line even DC's Underworld rarely crossed. The message wasn't just to the cops, it was to anyone watching. Mess with the throne, and you drown in blood. Trust cracked from within. A runner named Daryl went missing, along with $75,000 in street product. Perry found him holed up in a motel outside Baltimore, high, scared, and rambling about betrayal. Wayne didn't raise his voice. He just listened. And when Daryl finished crying, Perry put a bullet in his eye. Loyalty wasn't optional. It was law. But something shifted. Perry didn't walk out proud. He walked out tired. He was bleeding soldiers faster than he could replace them. The streets weren't loyal. And the weight of building a kingdom made of fear was that you always had to hold it up yourself. His crew wasn't the same. Young guns wanted clout, not discipline. They posted photos, flashed stacks, bragged about murders on corners with open ears. Perry warned them once. When one of them laughed, that same night, he vanished. The new generation didn't understand silence. They didn't understand Perry. The code was dying. And every time he tried to teach it, they mocked the past. But Perry didn't need followers. He needed soldiers. And those who couldn't learn, they disappeared. One by one. Until only the quiet ones remained. The streets were changing. But so was Perry. He was sharpening, not softening. Then came the hit that changed everything. A Colombian middleman was murdered in Perry's territory, without his knowledge. Cartel sent word. Find who did it or take the blame. Perry knew it was bait. Someone wanted him at war. Still, he responded the only way he knew, direct and surgical. In less than a week, 3 bodies floated in the Anacostia River, each one connected to the real shooters. But it cost him. One of the corpses was a cousin to his oldest friend. The streets don't make room for sentiment. Perry didn't apologize. He just lit a cigarette, watched the rain, and whispered, "That's the game." It started with a phone call. Static breath, then a whisper. "He's talking." Perry didn't panic. He listened. Names were named, one of them his own. His heart didn't race, but his hand tightened around the receiver. Someone inside was feeding the feds. Someone who knew routes, drops, even safe houses. Perry scanned the room. Old friends, blood brothers, men Hend bled beside. But only one of them had vanished for a week without word. Rico. His protégé. His shadow. The boy he'd raised like a son. The betrayal wasn't loud, it was surgical. Cold. Rico hadn't disappeared. He'd been flipped. And in that moment Perry didn't feel rage. He felt silence. The kind that comes before something breaks. Rico didn't run. He thought he was untouchable. Protected. His wire was buried deep, stitched into his jacket lining, feeding the feds every move, every word. He was their star witness. Their golden boy. But Perry didn't need proof. He needed motive. And when he looked back he saw it all. Rico's questions, his sudden wealth, his late arrivals. Perry waited. Then invited him to dinner. Just the two of them. No tension. No raised voices. Over plates of steak and jazz on vinyl, Perry poured wine and said, "So when did you start wearing wires, son?" Rico froze. The world paused. Then Perry smiled. Soft, slow, deadly. Rico's hands trembled. His mouth opened, but no words came. Perry didn't raise his voice. He didn't move. He just reached into his coat and set a black velvet pouch on the table. Inside, Rico's burner phone, wire, and a note. "Nice try." Rico finally spoke, voice cracking. "They said you'd kill me." Perry leaned in and whispered, "They were right." But he didn't pull the trigger. Not yet. He made Rico walk out alive. Made him sweat. Made the feds think their asset was clean. But behind the scenes, Perry made moves. He didn't want Rico dead. Not fast. He wanted him erased, reputation, leverage, everything. Death was too easy. He wanted Rico forgotten. Within days, Rico's name vanished from street talk. His crew stopped answering calls. His stash spots were raided, by Perry's own hands. Contacts turned cold. Perry didn't fire a shot. He erased Rico's shadow. And when the feds realized their witness had no street weight left, they pulled him. Relocated him. But Perry already knew. His people at the courthouse slipped him an address. A town 3 states over. A diner he liked. Perry sat across the street for 6 hours. Just watching. Not for vengeance, but for closure. When Rico finally walked out, head low, older, thinner, Perry just nodded. Then drove off. It was over. Rico would spend his life watching every mirror. That was the sentence. But the damage was done. Rico wasn't the only one talking. The feds had built a web, informants, wiretaps, bank trails. Perry's name echoed in sealed indictments. His safe houses felt less safe. His crew thinner. The empire, once unshakable, now cracked at the edges. Perry knew the clock had started ticking. He wasn't scared, he was focused. Every move had to matter. No excess. No noise. He sold off assets, moved funds, vanished contacts. But there was one thing he couldn't bury. The legend. Every kid on every block still whispered his name. Every fed still circled him. The king wasn't dead, but the throne was burning. And Perry? He was ready to fight fire with silence. The streets were louder now, too loud. The new blood had no code, and the old guard were either dead or running scared. Perry stood at the center of the storm, not as a man fading out, but as a man preparing for war. A crew he once protected, now allied with out-of-town hitters, made a move. They torched one of his safe houses, thinking it would draw him out. It didn't. Perry didn't chase smoke. He let the fire burn. Then, 3 days later, he sent a message. Bodies. No bullets, no witnesses, just a room with 5 corpses and the word, respect, carved into the drywall. It wasn't a warning. It was the declaration of a final campaign. Perry didn't want peace. He wanted balance. And if blood had to pay for it, so be it. News traveled fast. Cops found the scene and whispered among themselves, Silk's back. Panic spread across crews from Baltimore to Richmond. Perry had become folklore, but now he was real again. The city clenched. His enemies scrambled to leave, to hide, to talk. One of them flipped. Marcus Twin Collins, a mid-level supplier who once kissed Perry's ring, gave the feds locations, dates, drop sites. In return, they gave him protection. But Perry's reach wasn't bound by walls or states. He sent a man to Chicago, clean, quiet, final. When Twin's body was found in a hotel shower, the feds doubled security on every other witness. But it was too late. Fear had already spread like smoke. And Wayne didn't need to kill them all. He just needed them to believe he would. Then came the night of reckoning. Word leaked that Perry would be at a known stash house. The feds mobilized like it was war. Helicopters, riot trucks, unmarked sedans. The house was empty. But the rooftop? Not so much. Perry stood there in a black trench, hands out, calm. No gun. No crew. Just him. Come to collect, he asked when they surrounded him. The lead agent flinched. Everyone expected chaos. But Perry surrendered. No resistance. No speech. Just silence. Because the war was never meant to be won. It was meant to end on his terms. A final act of control. A final image burned into the minds of everyone who had tried to erase him. Inside the interrogation room, they asked him why. Why now? Why surrender after decades of silence and survival? Perry leaned back in his chair, handcuffed, eyes heavy with calm. Because y'all still don't get it, he said. This was never about escaping, it was about being remembered right. The agents pressed, names, locations, deals. Perry didn't flinch. He wasn't there to talk. He was there to end the story, the way only he could. On his terms. His silence became louder than any confession. In that room, even the ticking clock seemed to stop. Wayne Silk Perry didn't confess. He closed a chapter. The trial was a spectacle. News cameras lined the courthouse. Former allies turned state witnesses. They tried to unravel a legend in neat legal language, but Perry just sat there silent, unmoved. Every detail they exposed was already myth. Every crime they mentioned, already whispered in barbershops and corners. When the verdict came, life without parole, he nodded once. No tears. No anger. As he was led away, someone shouted, "You'll die in there." Perry turned, smiled slightly and said, "I already died out here." The courtroom went silent. No one had a reply. The king hadn't fallen. He had walked off his throne. Inside the concrete belly of America's prison system, Wayne Silk Perry vanished from the headlines, but not from memory. Cell 314 became his new kingdom. No phone, no street, no silence beyond steel and screams. Yet Perry adapted. He read legal books, lifted every day, kept to himself. Even in chains he was feared. New inmates whispered his name like a cautionary prayer. Guards didn't test him. Other shot callers offered protection, he declined. Respect, like before, was earned through quiet presence. He became something more than legend. He became proof. Proof that the streets don't retire their kings, they cage them. But even in captivity, Perry never looked broken. Just watching. Always watching. Letters flooded in. From street kids, from lifers, even from rappers who idolized the myth. Perry read every one. Responded to none. He had nothing left to prove. His empire was gone, his name etched in DC concrete like a ghost tag, died out. But something in those letters stirred him. Some begged for advice. Some cursed his choices. One asked, "Would you do it all again?" Perry held that one in his hand for an hour. He never wrote back. But he did underline a sentence in the Bible that night. Ecclesiastes 3:8, a time for war and a time for peace. Then he closed the book and turned off the light. Inmates came to him like students to a monk. Not for strategy, but for clarity. Perry never preached. He just asked questions. "What's your exit plan? Who will remember you right?" Young shooters listened. Some changed. Some didn't. But they all walked away different. Perry, once the architect of fear, had become its interpreter. His power didn't come from fists anymore. It came from restraint. Violence was easy. Stillness. That was strength. He didn't seek redemption. He didn't ask for forgiveness. But behind those walls, he built a new kind of influence. Quiet, permanent, invisible. The kind of power that outlives bullets. Time wore down the body, but not the eyes. Perry's hair grayed at the temples, muscles leaner, but his gaze still cut through walls. He no longer counted days. Calendars meant nothing to men who lived on memory. He wrote notes, cryptic and sharp, for no one but himself. Names, null. Numbers. Fragments of past wars. Every now and then, he'd hear a guard hum a rap verse with his name in it. He'd smirk, barely. Outside, he was legend. Inside, he was habit. A ghost wearing skin. But in that silence, Perry found something the streets never gave him. Peace. Not absolution. Not rest. But peace. A cold, echoing stillness where nobody screamed his name in fear. Years passed. The world changed. New crews rose. New codes formed. But one thing never changed. The legend of Wayne Silk Perry. Street kids still used his name as a warning and a prayer. His story was told in lyrics, in whispers, in memorial murals that never faded. And Perry? He sat in silence, a man who had burned the world for a throne, and walked into prison wearing its crown. He never apologized, never explained. He just existed, a monument in flesh. And long after his voice was gone, his silence would echo in alleys, in courtrooms, in the hearts of men still chasing ghosts. There's no retirement plan for legends. Only memory. And memory doesn't die. The letters stopped coming. The street stopped whispering. But Wayne Perry remained. Decades deep in concrete silence, he didn't count on visitors, and none came. Not family. Not old friends. Just ghosts. They visited at night in his dreams, in the hallway reflections of steel doors. Every face he erased came back, not with anger but curiosity. "Did you win?" they seemed to ask. Perry never answered. He'd sit up in his bunk, sweat on his neck, heart steady. The truth? There was no victory. Just survival. And survival didn't make you free. It made you a prisoner to memory. Perry didn't flinch from those faces anymore. He just nodded. Let them pass. Somewhere on the outside, a teenager pulled a trigger and whispered, silk under his breath like a mantra. The myth lived on, not in books or records, but in broken cycles. Perry wasn't proud of that, but he understood it. He had become what he never wanted, a blueprint. And blueprints get copied. Legacy isn't what you leave behind. It's what others do with your name. And Perry's name? It was carved into DC, like a scar. The city had changed. Gentrified. But the pain remained in the corners, in the shadows. He had tried to control a world that devours its kings. And in doing so, he made sure it remembered his name, long after it forgot his story. The guards knew not to talk to him. He wasn't hostile, just unreadable. But one rookie asked, "If you could go back, what would you change?" Perry stared out the tiny window, iron bars slicing moonlight. He said, "The silence. I should have broken it sooner." It wasn't regret. It was recognition. He hadn't just built an empire of fear. He had buried the parts of himself that could feel anything but power. And now, stripped of everything, that truth echoed louder than the gunshots ever did. Not every man who walks away from a crown feels lighter. Some feel hollow. Some feel free. He wasn't sure which one he was. They say time heals all wounds. But for Wayne Perry, time only sharpened the truth. He was no longer feared, no longer hunted, just remembered. And memory. It doesn't forgive. It archives. His life wasn't about redemption. It was about understanding. He didn't want freedom anymore. He wanted clarity. And in the stillness of his final years, he found it. He wasn't a monster. He was a response. To poverty. To betrayal. To survival. He never asked for forgiveness. But he finally forgave himself. Not for the lives he took, but for the boy he buried to become the man the streets needed. They buried him without ceremony. Just a number on a ledger and a pine box under state soil. No headlines. No tributes. But that night, in Southeast DC, someone lit a candle under his old mural. No words. Just flame. Just silence. Because legends don't need funerals. They just echo. Wayne Silk Perry was gone, but not gone. His empire had collapsed. His name outlawed from memory by courts and cops. But on the block, they still whispered. He didn't die in prison, he's still alive. He was a ghost all along. Truth didn't matter anymore. Only the echo. And in the end, that's all he ever wanted, to never be forgotten. Even if remembered by fear.